You got to take the over.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my 5th year covering the University of Louisville, 3rd year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with monarchmoney.com. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. The 2025 FanDuel football win totals are out. Louisville is set at over under 8.5 wins. I'm going to explain why you need to take the over, and thus why Louisville will win at least 9 games in the 2025 campaign. We'll dive into another 2-part weekly mailbag, 3 questions about men's basketball, 3 regarding football. Thank you all for submitting those questions. I will answer them to the best of my abilities. We start out in the football realm. The 2025 win totals are set by FanDuel, one of the sponsors of the show. The Louisville Cardinals are sitting at 8.5 wins, over under 8.5. I'm taking the over, and I would recommend that you do the same because Louisville will win at least 9 games in 2025. Of course, with the whole over-under situation, that is regular season wins. Louisville will win at least 9 regular season games. And there are a couple reasons as to why I believe that. Now, let me go ahead and acknowledge that I understand the concerns. I watched the team last year. I know what the rebuttals are. I know the concerns on defense and the concerns about the annual trap game. More on that actually in the weekly mailbag. But we're going to put that to the side for the moment. Let's talk about the 3 reasons why I believe that the Cardinals will win at least 9 games this upcoming season. It begins with the offensive firepower. I think that the Louisville Cardinals will once again have one of the best offenses in the ACC and potentially in the country too. Is it going to be good enough for top 20? Well, why not is my response. It starts with having one of, if not the best running back duo in the country. Isaac Brown, Duke Watson, the 1-2 punch, not to mention the other players you have in that room with Keywan Brown, maybe John Maurice Wilder, but it starts with the first 2, maybe even Keywan Brown as well. We saw how good both of these players were as true freshmen. Isaac Brown was one of the best running backs in the country. Duke Watson showed that when his number was called, he rose to the occasion. And you factor in the natural progression between freshman and sophomore year. They have another year in Jeff Brohm's system, another year to work out and get better with running backs coach Chris Barclay. And I think that we are talking about 2 home run hitting running backs that are going to lead this Cardinals offense. So you have one of the best running games in the country. You bring in Miller Moss, to one of the top transfer portal QBs. I think he's going to be a player that fits Jeff Brohm's system really well. Not to mention the veteran presence there. I just feel like this is going to be a really good partnership. Jeff Brohm's offense and Miller Moss, I feel like it's going to be a really good season. Is he as talented as Tyler Shuck? Arm strength-wise, no. I think that there are some things that Shuck does better than Moss, but I also think that there are some things that Moss does better than Shuck, and we'll see that in the fall. But offense is going to be good. You bring back Chris Bell, projected to be one of the best receivers in the conference. Same with a healthy Colin Lacey. You went out to the portal and got a couple of wide receiver 3 options. I think tight end is a question mark, but still talent there. I trust Richard Owens with the offensive line to protect the quarterback and open up holes for the running game. So the offense is going to be great. We then go into the second reason, that is Brohm's track record. 2 seasons back-to-back with at least 9 victories. Now, one of those was 8-4, and then you won a bowl game. But I think things were a little bit weird last year. You won 10 games regular season in 2023, albeit with a weaker schedule. I feel like your floor is pretty high with Jeff Brohm. Now, you do have to avoid the trap game. But to play the devil's advocate off of that, Brohm's teams usually do really well, and they get up for top games. And you have some really solid games coming up this fall. So I think that just Jeff Brohm's ability to get the best out of his players, his track record over the past couple of seasons, hovering around that 8, 9, 10 win mark, they're going to stay there. So I think that this is going to be another season where they are on track to do good things. The question of whether or not they're going to get to the college football playoff, well, that's a completely different conversation, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the over-under win total, and I feel confident that they're going to get over 8.5 wins. The third reason, and this is more centered around the context of the season, I think that the schedule permits it. I don't think it's as challenging as 2024. I don't know that it's as weak as 2023. Like, you look at the schedule, the main thing that jumps off the page is that you don't have that overly challenging out of conference game that you had in 2023, actually in 2024 with Notre Dame. There is no Notre Dame on the schedule. So your out of conference slate is Eastern Kentucky, James Madison, Bowling Green, and Kentucky. All 4 of those should be penciled in victories. Kentucky is a rivalry game. I understand they're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the SEC this year. By all means, you should win that game. If you don't, it's a problem. You look at some of the other contests, you have 8 home games this year. And you look at the 4 road games. One is at Miami at an NFL stadium. One is at Pittsburgh at an NFL stadium. So you only have 2 true road games. That's Virginia Tech and SMU. Will SMU be as good as they were this past year? Time will tell. Virginia Tech on the road is going to be a little bit of uncharted territory. Louisville doesn't really play there often. But Pittsburgh, Virginia, Boston College, California, Virginia Tech. Preliminary thought process here is that Louisville should be favored to win all of those games, and they should win all of those games. So I'm assuming that if you're talking about winning the games you're supposed to win, which 4 non-conference, so you're at 4-0, I think you're supposed to beat Pittsburgh and Virginia. That's 6-0. I'm not going chronological order. I'm just going by opponents. Boston College and Virginia Tech, I think that is 8-0. California is 9-0. In a perfect world. Now, obviously, that's not always the case. More on that in a second. That leaves 3 games. At SMU, at Miami, versus Clemson. At 9-0, you could lose all 3 of those and get to 9 wins. Or you lose one of the ones that got you to this hypothetical 9-0, and then you win one of those 2. Or there's just different combinations. I just feel like we're going to be in for a good season. I understand the concerns, though. They're centered around the defense. Louisville's defense last year showed that even with the top 20 offense, you can still only win 8 games. And it wasn't always the defense's fault, but the Stanford game. How many points did they give up? SMU, completely not even prepared for that up-tempo offense. Miami, like they did against everyone else last year, they scored at will. And then Notre Dame, that was a wild game where everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And it wasn't on the defense as much as that was probably the offense. But of the 4 losses, the 3 of the 4 were likely pointing to the defense. So I get it. I'm actually pretty fond of the front 7 this year for the Cardinals. I think the pass rush is going to be better than anticipated. I think that the same goes for the interior of the defensive line. I'm extremely bullish on the linebacking core with Stanquan Clark, TJ Quinn, TJ Capers, Caleb Perry, some guys in that room. The main concern is centered around the secondary. You lose a ton, and the Cardinals defense got gashed through the air last year. But the main question is centered around Ron English, of course. Will Louisville be able to switch things up? And my hope is that with Jeff Brohm being the smart guy that he is and as successful as the head coach that he is, I understand he's loyal to his friends, and Ron English is a good friend of his. But I'm hoping that in the decision to keep Ron English, the duo sat down, whether it was just them two or the rest of the defensive staff, and said, look, we have to figure out how to put our players in a better position to succeed. Whether it is on the field and relaying those signs quicker to the defense so they're not caught off guard, or, improving communication, something. Like, I just don't think it was one of those situations where Jeff Brohm's like, dude, you're my friend, you're back for a third year. I think it's, okay, we need a clear-cut plan as to you're going to do X, Y, Z to help the defense get better and not hold this team back in 2025. I'm hoping that's the case, and I'd like to think that that's the case, but of course we don't know. Regardless, I still think the offense is going to be able to put up a ton of points, and if the defense can just be serviceable, it's going to be a good season. So, and then you have to avoid the trap game. I understand that as well. Pittsburgh in 23, Stanford in 24. I think that a lot of that comes with just preparation and better defense and the offense being better as a whole. And I think you could even have a trap game in 2025 and still get the 9 wins. Hopefully you don't have to worry about that, but it happens. When we come back, let's go to the football side of the mailbag. Some questions about my hot take for 2025. Who starts at wide receiver 3, and a little bit more about that trap game coming up when we return on this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account and wonder where all your money went between dining out, online shopping, etc., it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes into play. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building your wealth. If you're managing money with your partner, well, that's now smoother than ever because you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Card Nation, thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Let's get into the first part of the 2-part weekly mailbag, Monday mailbag, because it's on a Monday. First one is, what is one hot/unpopular take that you have about the football team that the rest of the conference might not agree with? So that was a little challenging because it's hard to put yourselves in the shoes of other fans because you don't really know what they believe, and you don't know what an overwhelmingly unpopular opinion would be, because I don't sit there and gauge what other fans think of Louisville. Like, I think about what could be unpopular, and I think that the one that I would come to would be that Duke Watson, along with Isaac Brown, like not just Isaac Brown, but Duke Watson's also a top 5 running back in the conference. That's what my hot take would be. I think that Duke Watson, people are equating being a backup to not being as good as other players. It's just one of those things where the Cardinals' backfield is stacked. It's loaded. Duke Watson is a high-level starter anywhere else in the conference. Like, I think of the other running backs, and of course, I don't know. I haven't really done as much analysis on other teams' transfer portal hauls and how good other teams are going to be. That's sort of a late June, July type assignment for me. But I just don't know that you could name, with Isaac Brown also in the mix, I don't think you can name 4 other running backs in the ACC that you could definitely go, oh, this guy's more talented than Duke Watson. This guy's better than Duke Watson. Like, I just don't believe that's going to be a thing. Like, I just don't think you could find 4 other running backs. I'm trying to think of players that are returning. Like, Virginia Tech lost their guy. I don't know if Georgia Tech returns any of theirs. Let's see. Florida State. No. Clemson. They lost Phil Maffa. They've got some talented guys returning, but even then, Pittsburgh, no. Maybe Syracuse. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, who for sure is going to be better than Duke Watson? And I guess it's probably because a lot of running backs left via the draft and transfer portal that I just don't know at the moment. Let's see. Who would be your prediction as of mid-May to start at wide receiver 3? I think it comes down to 2 players, maybe 3. I think that of the returning guys, Antonio Meeks, who had a really good spring game, is into the mix, but I ultimately believe it's going to come down to a transfer, whether that is NC State's Dakari Collins or whether that is San Jose State's Trayshawn Hurry. I think it is one of those 2 players, and I'm going to go with the latter here from San Jose State. 6'2", native of Palmdale, California, had 28 catches for 482 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2024 after transferring, spending 2 seasons at, was it Weber State? Yeah, Weber State. Had a breakout year for the Spartans. Host of the Portal on the Locked On Podcast Network and national recruiting analyst Brian Smith went out of his way to identify Hurry as a player that he's focusing on in this Louisville transfer portal class, and a guy that's going to, he alluded to him being a Brohm special, going out and getting a player from the non-power 4 ranks and coaching him up to be a significant contributor in the ACC. And I think that that's where Trayshawn Hurry comes into play. I think that he gives you that take the top off the defense home run ability that you might not necessarily have at the moment. I think that Chris Bell is a really good receiver. I think that Colin Lacey is more of a catch and run, yards after catch type player. Dakari Collins and Antonio Meeks, taller receivers over 6'3", that I believe do a really good job of high pointing the football. Probably solid options in the red zone. I just think that Hurry brings a little bit more explosiveness to the table. He's a little bit more dynamic, and I think that's sort of what you're looking for. But I do believe it might be a conversation that gets overblown a bit because wide receiver 3 could probably be by committee. So you might not necessarily know. Like, the wide receiver 3 role might change weekly, but going into week 1, I think that that's going to be Trayshawn Hurry. That gets that start at wide receiver 3. I know it's way too early to tell, but who would your potential biggest trap game in 2020-25 candidate be? 2020-25 candidate. 2020-25 trap game candidate. Well, I think that there's a couple of them. I'm not going to say Kentucky is going to be a trap game because rivalry games are always trap games, so it's sort of just there by default. I think SMU and Clemson, Miami are going to be pretty solid teams to play against. It's going to be interesting here because this is just a tough one, man. This is just a tough one. But maybe it could be Virginia because for whatever reason, Anthony Colandrea is just actually no, he's with UNLV. This is the tough part about this, is because there are so many moving parts in the transfer portal that you just don't know where they all went. And I haven't really done a ton of analysis into teams' previews. I'm I'm going to go here just as a rule of thumb. I think that Louisville's going to be favored in this game, but Saturday, November 1st at Virginia Tech, playing in Blacksburg is going to be a challenging game. Enter Sandman. They have a really tough home atmosphere. It's going to be one of the few challenging road games that the Cardinals will have to play. So I'm going to go with Virginia Tech here. It's hard to tell at the moment, and I'm sorry that I haven't done that much in-depth analysis, but we're just not really at that point of the season yet, and rosters aren't really even finalized at the moment. So I'm going to go Virginia Tech. Might be an easy, convenient answer, but hey, it's my answer. So we'll get to the 3 basketball questions when we return on this final segment of the Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Like I said, thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Content is sort of in a lull at the moment. We're just kind of patiently waiting for any basketball news. Pat Kelsey and company keeping things really close to chest, so not much to talk about. I don't really want to get into like position previews for football, schedule breakdown, trap games and stuff like that until we get into like July, early August. So if you all, and of course I'm working on bringing some guests onto the show. There will be 2 this week, Keith Artov and Grant Mulligan, but we're working to get some former Louisville players on the show, some Louisville coaches, etc. If you have any segment ideas that you would like me to discuss, please drop that idea in the comment section below. If someone has taken your idea, just like that comment so I can see which topics are the most desired to be discussed. So let's get into the final part of this 2-part Monday mailbag. Can Michael Brown Jr. be a top 10 pick in the 2026 NBA draft? 1,000% yes. Michael Brown Jr., depending on which recruiting site you look at, he's either the number 1 or number 2 point guard in the class. It's either him or Darius Acuff that is going to Arkansas. And I know that 5-star rankings don't always equal high NBA draft selections, but I think that Michael Brown Jr. is one of those. He's one of those ones. He's a dog. And even if the scoring isn't extremely elite, like let's say Michael Brown Jr. Comes in and he is a respectable but not great 3-point shooter. He's a double-digit scorer, but he's not one of those guys that takes over the game in terms of scoring. Maybe finishing around the rim needs some improvement. Like I'm looking at like worst case scenario here, in my opinion. I think that his court vision and his upside as the best passer in this class raises that floor and also raises the ceiling as to where he can get drafted. I think that for a guard that's 6'3", potentially 6'4", proving that he's a better on-ball defender than some think, once he adds a little bit of weight to his frame this summer, with his 3-level scoring and his elite, and I don't like to throw that term around loosely, but elite court vision. I mean, there's a chance that he's the number 1 point guard off the board, like potential top 5 pick in 2026. Of course, everything's got to go right. You have AJ Debansa, you have Darren Peterson, you have the Boozer twins, you've got some other players, Koa Pete. There's a lot of players in this class that are going to Chris Sanak Jr. going to Houston. It's a great class of high school players going into the college ranks, and it's going to be a very interesting draft, but I just don't think that they're in. Of course, maybe I'm a little biased. I just don't think that there's a point guard better. And if you say Acuff, well, you can't name me another one better than Michael Brown. With as great of an offseason that Louisville has had so far, do you think that expectations will be too high next year? Well, I mean, expectations are going to be 1,000% second weekend, if not further, depending on how the early part of the season goes. But, I mean, unless you're one of those people that say it's national championship or bust, I mean, expecting this team to make it to the second weekend is not high whatsoever. I think that it's not really a drawback, but one of the ramifications, if you will, of having such a successful first season where you exceeded expectations is that year two, there's going to be more expected from you. Like you sort of raise the curve a little bit more and expectations will be higher. So, but I don't think that expecting to make the second weekend and being a national championship contender with this roster and with the preseason hype, like I don't think that is too high of an expectation. Like the only time that it would be too high is that if you're going and you're saying, okay, you have to make the Final Four or you have to win the national championship. And I just think at that point, yeah, expectations might be a little bit too rich for me. Not saying they can't get there, but saying that if you don't get there, it's a bust of a season. That's a little bit it's a little bit too high for me. The final question of this one is, why is Louisville's backcourt not getting talked about enough? I don't know. I just don't know where the intention of the question is coming from, because I feel like, to the contrary, the Cardinals' backcourt's getting talked about pretty significantly. I mean, the local media side of things, of course, is hyping up the backcourt. There are multiple analysts out there that are throwing the Cardinals into their preseason top 5, top 10 ACC transfer portal rankings that we talked about last week. I mean, Isaac McNeely, Ryan Conwell, and Adrian Woolley were all in the top 4. So I think that the only maybe answer I would say is that all 3 of those elite level guards committed early in the transfer portal cycle. So I think there is a little bit of discussion fatigue, if you will. Not really a term, but there's a fatigue of the discussion of Louisville's backcourt. We're just at that point of the season where there hasn't been much college basketball talk in general. I mean, it's May 12th. College basketball season is next November. There's not really much portal talk at the moment. Like, things have really dried up on the conversation side to where I don't think Louisville's backcourt's being talked about enough, because nothing is being talked about right now. Nobody's really talking about college basketball at the moment in the grand scheme. Like, you have a couple of other conversations, but I think until we get around to the fall, you won't hear much unless the Cardinals, or let me rephrase, until Louisville adds another player or players to the mix. Like, I just think things have hit a period of time where there's just not much basketball talk. I wish there was, because basketball was extremely good to the Locked On Louisville podcast this year. But it was always going to hit a wall. We're there. We're there on May 12th. So I just don't think that there's a reason why the backcourt's not getting talked about, other than nothing's getting talked about at the moment. That is going to wrap up this Monday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll have Keith Artov on tomorrow evening. There will be an episode tomorrow evening talking about the new proposed or rumored college football playoff format and much more. Grant Mulligan on the show either Wednesday or Thursday, so be sure to tune into that. That's going to wrap up this show. Everyone have a great day. Have a great start to your week, and go Cards.